Now, what do you do when you see hurtful patterns of communication reoccurring when your son comes home from college? Well, we'll talk about this and a whole lot more on this week's podcast. Find your voice to get healthy. Healthy Family Connections, the #1 rated family therapy podcast, is sponsored by Neil D. Brown, LCSW, and I'm your host, Neil D. Brown, and I'm here to help you get that enjoyable family that you work for every day. Please remember, this podcast is for educational purposes only. It is not a substitute for psychotherapy. And today, I'm with my co-host, Robin Holland, my business associate and parent of 2 fabulous young women. Hi, Robin. It is good to have you here.
Hey, Neil, it is always good to be here.
All
So
right.
glad.
Okay. Well, I did not record a podcast last week because there was so much snow up in the mountains. I couldn't resist. So my wife and I, Eileen and I, shot up to the mountains, got a couple of fabulous days of skiing in. But let's not talk about that. Let's talk about what we're hearing today from Francesca, who writes to us from Minneapolis, Minnesota. And Robin, would you be so kind as to read her question?
Dear Neil, I have a question about dealing with an old pattern in my family. My son was just visiting home from college, and he and his dad got into an old familiar fight about our son's habit of not putting things back where they belong. I left the area where they were fighting and grabbed a beer to calm myself down in another room. Later, my husband came in, still steaming about our son's behavior and his unwillingness to take responsibility for his behavior. I told him that I thought the yelling was way over the top and that neither he nor our son were listening to each other. They kept repeating themselves and accusing each other of not listening. This just angered my husband even further, and he accused me of siding with our son. I realized that the fighting and my drinking are linked, and that I've used alcohol to deal with family stress. I've been getting healthier this past year. I'm in therapy. I've cut back on my drinking, lost weight, and I've been finding my voice with my husband and feeling much better. In this case, I can't get him to listen, and I'm upset with myself for using alcohol to cope. I know I can only change me, but do you have any suggestions for how to deal with this unhealthy pattern?
Hmm. Okay. Well, that is, in fact, a dilemma. But first of all, wow, congratulations to Francesca for committing to a plan for personal health, personal growth, and congratulations for making that all the progress she's made.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, that's just fabulous that, here she is, her kids are off to college, and it's time for her to do some personal growing.
Right. Taking
Yeah.
responsibility for her own self.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes that's true. You're so caught up in everybody else's needs. Now your kids are off to college, and you know what? It's time for me to prioritize my needs.
Mhm.
So it's great that she's doing that. And I really like her thought about finding her voice.
Yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm. It's such an important concept. You know, it's so important to us as people. It's so important to family health that we can be open with our thoughts and our feelings and our needs. Uh,
Mhm.
you, you know, when we can't or believe we can't be open with our feelings, then the result of that is we get resentful, we close down, we get detached, we get depressed, and that's bad for everyone. So,
Mhm.
and then everyone realizes, oh, this isn't a safe place for our thoughts and feelings. So, finding one's voice is what it's really all about. Yeah, make sense?
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
I know for myself, like resentful, then it turns into like worse. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
pissed.
Yeah. So, that's part of being healthy is being able to say what you need, saying your thoughts, saying your feelings. So, what I'm going to imagine for Francesca is that, it started in her family of origin as a child, that sense of unworthiness and limiting her fully empowered voice. Yeah, and then, she gets married and has been in a marriage with a husband that doesn't easily make space for her voice, for whatever reasons. His own issues get in the way, and for whatever good qualities he may have, she's been married for a long time, and she's not saying he's the worst thing ever. She's just saying that this is an issue. And but he hasn't been listening to Francesca easily. She's had to push that, and he hasn't listened to their son. So that's not his best strength.
Hmm.
Uh, and so she grew up where her voice was not fully invited, and then she's been married where her voice is not fully invited, and now she's working on it, which is great. And she wants, like, she's been doing better, but now she sees it in this family dynamic that she wants to go up against the headwinds of this family uh, tradition, this not
Hmm.
very happy family tradition of yelling.
Like a just
So,
locked in pattern that's like already kind of automatic.
yep, it's familiar. And then she went and grabbed herself a beer, just like she apparently always did, and go, "What the hell am I doing? This isn't the new me. This is old me." And that's what patterns do. It kind of pulls us back into those old ways of behaving. When we get into that old familiar context, the old familiar destructive self-destructive patterns can emerge. Yeah. So, I'm with Francesca. This pattern in her family needs to change for lots of reasons. Uh, for one, whatever's going on with her son, that he doesn't put things back where they belong. Well, apparently, yelling, which is the old behavior and the recurring behavior, isn't helping. So why continue to do something that doesn't help?
Yeah, they would call that insanity in some places.
Exactly.
Keeping doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result.
Exactly. So that's one good reason not to be yelling anymore. We also know that being yelled at is destructive to children's emotional health, and it creates trauma. Now, it may not be the worst level of trauma one can imagine. He's not beating his kids with coat hangers, but it's enough trauma to injure self-esteem, and it can create an overstimulated sympathetic nervous system, right?
Hmm.
And kind of go on to alert. When am I going to get yelled at?
Yeah, super sensitivity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's even triggering Francesca's nervous system.
Hmm.
Now she wants to grab a beer to calm herself back down. Yeah. And by the way, I would add that using alcohol or any other drugs to manage feelings, not just, like, this is a nice thing, I'm going to have a drink, but it's related to, like, I need this to make myself feel okay because of the family dynamics. Well, what that does is that's a homeostatic element in the family dynamics.
What does that mean, homeostatic?
Homeostatic, yes, that's a term that's mostly thought of in biology, right? So, like, an ecology is homeostatic in the sense that it recreates itself, it holds itself steady against forces of change. And so, every environment has homeostatic forces and change forces, and every every environment needs enough homeostatic force that it doesn't blow the thing up and change it so much so that it's unrecognizable, and it needs enough change capacity that it can deal with changing circumstances.
So in other
So
words, this using the alcohol would be helping it stay the same.
helping it stay the same. So now she's going to quiet her own voice, quiet her own feelings, make herself feel okay in the face of circumstances that are not okay. All right.
Well, good for her that she realized that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then the other thing is their son is a young adult now. He's going to college, for crying out loud.
Mm.
Uh, Yelling at your kid to behave is something that's not good, but it's more common with kids. Hey, I told you not to do that. Knock it off, right? I mean,
Yeah, when they're small.
that's not the best way to communicate, but it's pretty common for young kids. It's not a way to talk to a young adult. It's like disrespecting their emerging young adulthood. And that's not the way you speak to someone that you want to know that you approve of their young adulthood. You don't have to
Mm.
approve of the fact that you didn't put something back where it belongs, but you want to say, "Hey, you're a young adult, and I'll talk to you like an adult."
Mm.
Yeah. So yelling at a college kid because they didn't put something back is ridiculous. It's inappropriate. So those are lots of reasons that things should change. And you know, Francesca, you are absolutely right for writing in and saying, you know, I want this pattern to change.
Yeah,
So what I think is we need to support Francesca in building on the progress that she's made in empowering her voice. That's what I think.
I like that.
Yeah. So at a calmer moment, what I think Francesca can do is, first of all, find a calmer moment, not when her husband's all fired up, but you know, another time. Hey, let's go for a walk. Something I want to discuss with you. And it's and she'll have to let him know that what she wants to discuss is important to her. So she needs him to listen and not respond or interrupt until she's done talking, and that she wants him to listen carefully to what she's saying and take it seriously, not get defensive or blow it off, that this is important to her.
Hmm.
Now, she has said she's been bringing her voice forward in their relationship with some success. So assuming that she's going to have, you know, that he's not going to blow everything off every time, that she has made some inroads with being able to talk to someone who tends to think he's right a lot.
Yeah, good for her.
All right. And then if he doesn't say, okay, if he says, well, what if I have a different idea? I'm not going to just give you carte blanche to talk. Then say, okay, well, then I'm not going to talk. He'll get curious enough and to agree. I could almost guarantee that, right? When you say, I've got something very important to tell you, but not until this, someone's going to
Hmm.
say, okay, I'll agree to anything. I just want to know what's on your mind. So then, Francesca, what you can do is you can just run through the points, you know, we've just talked about. Your yelling isn't helping. It's destructive to our son. It's destructive to me. And your son is a young adult, and that's no way to parent a young adult. That's just not appropriate anymore. So I think just run through those things and then let him know that you're not supporting the idea that your son shouldn't be talked with about behaviors that are not helpful or that you want to see him deal with differently. That's fine.
Hmm.
But you want you want to set a limit with yelling behavior in the family. That
Hmm.
you don't want any more yelling. That's it.
Yeah.
And now what often happens is the yeller will say,
Hmm.
"Oh, I'm not yelling. I'm simply expressing my point of view and that he's not hearing. And he doesn't hear me, so I have to be a little bit more vigorous. and how I express myself. And so I'm just being, I'm just, first of all, I'm right, and he needs to listen, and I'm just going to be vigorous in how I communicate it. I am not yelling. I am being just very strong in my communication. To which I think, Francesca, what you can do is you can say, well, I hear it as triggering. I hear it as overly emotional. I hear it as disrespectful and bullying. And I need it to stop. And if he says he doesn't know what you're talking about, then say, okay, well, look, let's do this. We're going to get a resource for communication that we can look at together and understand what healthy communication looks like and sounds like. So,
Maybe even practice it.
yeah, I mean, there are books on healthy communication. One that's very popular and well regarded is nonviolent communication.
Mm-hmm.
That's a model that's that's all around the world. I don't know how many languages it's in, but they're using it all around the world.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
awesome.
yeah, and you could take an online course. You could take an online seminar with another half a dozen or a dozen people that are working with an NVC trainer, and you could be part of a seminar that practices the skill sets, and so that we can all know what it's about. But the important thing is that, Francesca, you draw your line in the sand and you find your voice to communicate your standards and your boundaries. You should not have to live with your nervous system getting overstimulated. That's trauma, and you don't want it for you. You don't want it for your kids. You don't want it in the family.
Mm-hmm.
So no more yelling or righteously over making our point, period. Yeah. It's time for our family to grow and improve. I'm not going to tolerate that anymore. It's not acceptable.
Yeah, it's not healthy.
Yeah. So what do you think about that? Okay.
Yeah, I like I think that there's it might just my my hunch is it might be a little bit sticky at the beginning, depending on how much has already been done, because she has been doing some, but like just getting started and like maybe it'll be easier than it sounds at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning. But
Mm-hmm.
that the idea of being able to grow as a couple in this, like getting on the same page on behalf of themselves on their in their relationship and also their son.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's important. As you can hear from my coaching here, I'm encouraging Francesca to be really strong in her and very clear about her boundary and her limit.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, she can be also very supportive of her husband. She can say things like, you're a great guy, you do all these great things, you care about us, you're upset about our kid because you want him to be a good version of himself. Uh, I know that you do all these, that you're capable and competent and loving in all these ways,
Yeah.
which, she hasn't shared with us. So I don't know exactly, but I'm sure that she's married for a quarter of a century or so, that there's some things that she loves about him. And
Yeah.
she can emphasize that too.
Yeah. What she appreciates. Probably
Mm-hmm.
go a long
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. And then if he gets defensive, stop, just acknowledge his feelings for the moment and go back to, and right now, I really need this to be heard. And I need
Mm-hmm.
you not be defensive. And I need you to make space for what I'm telling you. This is very important to me. And you deserve a family where we can talk at a mature and in a mature, mutually respectful way.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. That
That's really
you'll,
awesome.
yeah, and to offer him that you'll be heard better when
Mm-hmm.
we're all listening better. But
Mm-hmm.
listening has to start with us.
Yeah, I love that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, Francesca, we're we're impressed and we're grateful for your sharing both your progress and your questions. So keep up the great work. And just a reminder, everyone, mental health needs to be role modeled. Your children aren't going to be mentally healthier than you are. So take care of yourself. You need it, you deserve it, and you're worth it. Bye for now.